Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. Hey guys, today we are talking about the journey to recovery that trauma victims can often go through. And my guest today had quite the journey, and he had a lot of trauma as well. His name is Mike Jarrell, and he is an author. He is a motivational speaker. He helps people overcome addiction. He is somebody who is a success story, but please understand the road to his success has been very rocky with many different pit stops along the way. In fact, at one point, Mike was serving time in a jail. He was in jail for about 2 years. So we're going to be talking to him about how trauma frequently leads people to the type of self-destructive choices that can lead people to being in prison, where a lot of people with mental health issues end up because we have such a system that allows people to fall through the cracks. One of the things we need to address as a society is to stop treating our prison system as the catch-all for people who have generational trauma or an abusive background. We need to start healing before people hit the prison system. Hey, Mike, thank you so much for joining me today. Let's start with your book. Can you tell me what the title of your book is?
Yes, ma'am. And thank you for having me on. Actually, I have two books now. I've written two, and wrote one in April and one in May. The first one is it's called From the Streets to Redemption, Choosing to Live When the World Wants You to Die. And the second one is How to Find Happiness in the Worst Possible Times.
Now, the reason when you said choosing to live when the world wants you to die, the other thing we didn't talk about is that you are in addiction recovery as well.
Yes.
What were you addicted to?
Mostly heroin. I did have a bad heroin addiction, but I did meth for a lot of years too, because I was introduced to that as a young man when I served some time in the military, and even before then I was exposed to it. But my drug of choice originally was a lot of opiates, and I mean, when I say a lot, I mean an extreme amount. I did everything to the extreme.
Um, What we need to understand is that addiction, with our understanding of it, I'm always saying this in exactly the same way it's in its infancy, because we first learned to have compassion for it and kind of labeled it as a disease, rather than often it is a response to an emotional injury. It is actually a trauma response. And so what
Yeah.
we believed was a genetic predisposition can actually be a reaction to generational trauma. Hey, Mike, without like too many of the gory details, can you tell me a little bit about your backstory that led you through this journey and why so frequently people who are victims of abuse end up in our prison system? Because again, we aren't treating the trauma, we're simply blaming the victim.
Absolutely. When I was born, both my biological dad and my mom were both very young. My biological father was abusive to me, or not to me, but to my mother. And he did some horrific things to her, things that were done in front of me, that, just were very, very bad. And so at the age of 2, she had divorced my biological dad by the time I was 1. And by the time I was 2, she had met and married my stepdad, who raised me, the only dad I've ever known. Because my biological dad, I haven't seen him since I was 2. I'll be 45 in October, and he's in prison the rest of his life. Both my mom and my stepdad, who raised me. So when I say my dad, I mean the man who raised me, are both passed on now. But from the time I was 2 until I went into the military, I was brutally physically beat, every day almost. A lot of it was to make sure that my mom, sister, and brother didn't catch that. Um, after many years, it became that was our relationship. So if it didn't happen, I felt weird, and I would kind of provoke it. You know.
Mhm.
So it kind of became a trauma bonding type situation where that was my normal everyday thing, and without it, I couldn't function. I didn't know how to act. Um, but with the things going on at home, I took it out on other people at school and things like that. I had a lot of issues. Um, Except for I excelled at school. As long as I was in my studies in school, I was doing great. They tried to move me up from the 3rd grade to the 5th grade. My parents said no. Again, in the 7th grade, they wanted to move me to high school. They said no. So I got bored. And when I get bored, I get into trouble.
Yeah.
So now, mind you, I did complete high school because I knew I wanted to. I had to get away from my dad somehow. So I decided to join the army. I was sent over to Bosnia in the 90s, and that made things worse because I had PTSD before I went in, and I didn't know it. So being over there, it really it made things a lot worse. In my early 20s, I moved to Michigan. My parents split up. And from there, I found freedom because I didn't have a childhood growing up. I had to work for my own stuff. I had to do my own thing. I had to sometimes pay my parents' bills, even at 17 years old, going to school, paying my own bills, living on my own because I moved out for a little while and tried to make it on my own, and it didn't work very well. But those things all, and then there was also the fact that my parents did drugs in front of us because even though they didn't want us to do them, they were pretty open about them because they wanted us to know what was safe and what was not safe, and that there was things that could kill us.
It's
So
what you're describing is that generational trauma. You started out with immature parents who weren't done forming as human beings themselves, and so their impulse control was not adequately cemented in the foundation of a mature adult. And so they likely repeated the patterns that were around them. And then we do what we learn, we do what we see. And
right,
so it led to a difficulty in your interpersonal relationships. And many people who are drawn to the armed services are actually seeking that kind of structure that they lacked
right,
within their own upbringing.
and
So
honestly,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I don't understand it because both my stepdad and my mom were both raised in very good Christian homes.
Mm.
They were raised to work hard and be in good homes. They weren't treated the way I was treated. So it's still, and I can't even ask why now because they're passed on. Now that I know, now that I've healed and transformed, I have those questions, but I can't ask them why. But to me, it doesn't matter. I still love my parents. I forgave them. I understand that they were doing the best they could for what they thought they should do. Um, and people ask me all the time, how could you forgive a man that treated you so bad? I said, well, you know what? It may not have been right, but he prepared me for a world that almost killed me that I didn't know I was going to be into, that if he hadn't have done that, I would probably be dead right now, and I have to give some credit to that. I really do.
Well, that's what I'm always trying to help people understand is that our struggles are actually opportunities to learn about our strengths. And
Absolutely.
even though some of the lessons, like you wouldn't wish upon your worst enemy, if you look at a situation for what it taught you about yourself so that you continue to expand and to grow, that is the path towards healing. Because we can all get stuck in our
Absolutely.
pain and what happened to us. And what you're describing with a background of abuse leads to something called complex post-traumatic stress disorder,
Yeah.
which is an abusive situation from which there was no escape that usually lasted between 10 and 15 years, which is covers almost every abusive childhood I've ever heard of. So you're in Michigan as a young man, you're no longer in the army, and what starts happening that leads towards whatever landed you in prison? We haven't talked about that yet. So
I
I mean,
started
Mike and I genuinely, I haven't, we're going into this cold because I wanted to have an authentic conversation.
right. Well, and like I said, after all that, I didn't know what to do because I'd never had a childhood, really, so to speak. And I have been diagnosed with CPTSD, and we'll get more into that later. But I didn't know what was going on with me. All I knew is that there was a lot of darkness in me still that I couldn't control, and I didn't know where it was coming from. But it made me feel horrible. So I just started doing what any 20-something-year-old person would do that's making money and is has a lot of trauma. I started partying. I lived life. I acted out my childhood that I never got. I did whatever I wanted when I wanted. And like I said, again, I did anything and everything to the extreme. I pushed the limits of whether it was going to kill me or not. And I said, you know what? I'm going to see how far it's going to go before I actually kick that bucket,
What
you
people
know?
don't understand about a journey through addiction is it does start out usually from a traumatic place, but that people start doing it because the healthy escapism of most childhoods no longer like you lose the ability to be fanciful and playful. And so we go towards more and more destructive forms of escapism. And that if we view addiction as a character flaw, we're missing the point Addiction is
Right.
frequently the evidence of a deep emotional, energetic, and traumatic injury that somebody has not ever acquired the coping skills for. And the military, I have all the respect in the world for people in the military, but it's not a situation that's going to teach you a healthy processing of your feelings. It's going to be another situation that tells you to stuff them down. So you're in Michigan, you've been abusing drugs. Unfortunately, the type of drugs that you were abusing, there's always that addiction spiral coming up. So what happened then?
Well, again, let me reiterate. I started doing drugs at 15. I stopped to go in the military for a little while, and then I was introduced back into it there while I was there because, hey, they got to keep morale high because when you're in a chaotic situation and people or things are going nuts, it's a lot less likely somebody's going to hit friendly fire if their morale is up, they're happy. So once I got to Michigan, I just started partying, every night of the week. I mean, I had just enough in my pocket at the end of the week to pay my rent usually. But I just, I couldn't stop. It was like this, it was like a numbing thing, like something to forget or try to forget because the things that go through my head having this PTSD and the nightmares I have still to this day, I didn't know how to process. I didn't know how to deal with. I've been through counselors. I've been through psychiatric help. Even, it's I've gone through 3 marriages because of this, not understanding what was going on at the time. And, I tried to do my best. I learned what lessons I could after each one. Um, you know, I, I got caught in 2001 with a little bit of cocaine. I was fortunately able to get that, did what they asked me to. And it was part of the HIDA Act where they sealed the case. I was never convicted of it. So that remained for up until 2018 when I was caught with over 5 ounces of methamphetamines.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And so
So,
that's what led to the longer term conviction for you. Listen, one of the things that we need to understand is that ideally prisons are a rehabilitation system. Now, we don't treat them like that in this particular country, but we defined a person's worth by whether or not they've made a, sometimes catastrophic mistake. And it's very backwards for what will serve our society. If we begin approaching the idea of a prison conviction with an opportunity to turn a person's life around, to approach people who have erred on the side of, being illegal in their lives and committing crimes, to ask what caused this, what caused them to step outside of working with the structure for the betterment of all into working against it because they've always felt apart from it or as if it didn't serve them. So you're inside for 2 years. What was that like?
well, it's not a fun place to be. And let me just step back just a little bit. I was married to my third wife at the time. I was trying to take care of my family is why I was even selling the drugs. I didn't want to do this, but I'd lost a $30 an hour job. We get arrested. I get us out of the jail. They offered her a mental health and treatment court, so it's getting better. I mean, they're starting to recognize it, but they offered her this treatment and support court for mental health and co-occurring disorders. They did not offer it to me because the whole time she was telling them it was all my fault and it was me to blame. I thought I put myself through rehab. I put myself in mental health hospitals. I went to counselors, psychiatrists. I did all that on my own. And I still went to prison, which that saved my life, believe it or not, but it's a dangerous place. And let me reiterate this. It is not a place of rehabilitation. It is a crime school. They do not try to rehabilitate. I mean, they do some programs for certain people. Like I ended up going to their SAI program, which got me, I was in Michigan. So they have 100% minimum with truth in sentencing. So you have to do 100% of your minimum so you have an early release date and then you have a maximum. I was sentenced to 2 to 20 years. Now I'd already been in the county jail for almost a year, when I went. And then 3 months after so about 4 or 5 months into the prison sentence, I got sent to their boot camp, basically. So I got 13 months off my sentence, but it would have been almost 3 years by that point. However, I learned how a lot of things that if I had, been anybody else and not been on this healing journey by that point, because this is where I started my healing journey, I learned a lot more better ways to commit crime in there. I mean, there's nothing but officers, and then there's inmates or convicts, and you don't speak to the officers if you're a convict. There's prison politics. There's a way of life in there, and you can't get around it. There is no escaping it. You have to follow the ways of the people in there, because some of them people got to live in there for life.
Yeah.
Okay, so they determine what happens and what doesn't happen. And me personally, I just kept my head down. I pretty much stayed to myself and did my time. But I was approached, unfortunately I was part of other organizations, so I didn't have to, play my way into the gang politics or nothing like that. But for somebody that's going in there, that's 18, 19 years old, made one mistake, like with drugs, goes in there, they come out a career criminal. Now see, I was already that's what I was taught. So, I knew the ways before I went in there. Even my first time at 40 years old, I knew what to do and how to act. But for the guy that doesn't know, he's going to get approached and he's going to get extorted or pushed into that gang. And now he's stuck for life. He's in a life of trouble, all because he didn't get the help that he actually needed. Because and they don't recognize that they threw me in there saying that I caused my wife's downfall and everything. She messed up her and ended up having to serve out her sentence. I wasn't nowhere around. I get out, I do 18 months of parole, and I get off the first time, and I leave the state of Michigan because I wanted to be off there. I knew I had to start straightening myself up and getting out of this lifestyle.
Now, one of the things that when we're talking about people ending up in jail and people ending up in a very dehumanizing system that treats you like a number and a conviction, please stop being surprised, people, if we treat somebody with a lack of humanity and they lose sight of their own humanity. Because it is
391071. That's what you're
it,
known as, your prison number.
exactly. Honest to goodness, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy around how we treat people. We treat them as if they are no longer a human being with thoughts and goals and dreams, but rather
Absolutely.
simply the condensed, you did wrong. You are the embodiment of a mishap or a crime, and that's all we see in you. And we have to remember that people are more than the worst thing they ever did. And if you want people to rise above a set of circumstances, frequently socioeconomic situations will have put people in jail. They often, and people with my background, often end up as drug addicted prostitutes and in jail. Now, it didn't happen for me because of a lot of markers of privilege that are going to be very, very obvious to people in the way I express myself. I've always been well read. I've been a fortunate person as well. So part of the reason I'm very passionate about this is I know that, but for a few strikes of good fortune, this could have been my path in life, because people with the level of abuse I experienced frequently do end up as drug addicts, as prostitutes, and as in jails. And by the way, when I'm saying the word prostitute, I don't mean it in a derogatory fashion. I do believe that sex workers should be legalized, unionized, and protected. So I'm not using it as a reductive term. It's just that is usually the path out of trauma for people. And the path that you took is often the path that young men take. So you get out of jail and you never want to go back there. And I'm sure that it was there anything good in the experience? I'm not trying to be trite, but something helped
Yes,
you towards
yes,
something
there was
inside.
actually. It was the fact that everybody that said that they would, visit or write or call, and nobody did. It was the fact that of that taught me how to be okay to be alone, and some of the things I needed to learn, because I had a trauma bonding of I needed people to be around, and that's what my issue was. So therefore, I couldn't, be alone for a long time. And by being in there alone, I was talking to some of the older men in there, and telling them, about my story. And one of the guys comes up and says, "Yeah, man, I'm 26 years old. I've been in prison 4 times." I said, "Well, it's time for you to find a new profession. You're no good at it." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'm 40 years old. This is my first time here. I don't plan on coming back." Now, when I got out of prison, I was fighting sex trafficking because I watched my mom get trafficked when I was a young kid in front of me. And I agree with you on the sex worker thing. They're making their own decisions, whatever. They're not being forced into it. Fine, let them do their thing. But I fought sex trafficking itself, people forced into it. I still do to this day as I can, but that's where it almost killed me. I had literally, somebody give me I was on B12 for cancer treatments, as to keep my energy up, and somebody had swapped the B12 shot with a arsenic laced heroin shot. I put it in my hip, and it overdosed me and almost killed me.
Wow. Okay.
So yes,
Honest to goodness, one of the things that we also have to remember when we're talking about, when I said sex workers should be unionized and legalized, it is one of the things that would help prevent sex trafficking. Because if
It would.
something is done in a legal fashion, there are regulations, there are oversights, and there are protections for the people engaging in this. And something that is
What
black market is more easily targeted as an illegal activity. We waste our resources trying to stop something that is usually part of any working society. So, like
let
moving
me
just a, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Let me elaborate on that real quick. And the only reason I wanted to kind of stop you right there and elaborate is because what I found out is that most of these girls that I pulled out of there, out of these hotel rooms, were had never been prostitutes. They were groomed into it, got addicted to fentanyl-based meth, which
Mhm.
is by and they weren't groomed by these thugs out here. They were groomed by men that had professional jobs. Like I'm talking lawyers and judges.
That is something to understand about sex trafficking as well. We have all of these, it's not urban legend because it really does happen, but we have all these fears around people being snatched. And if they put like a zip tie on your car and you're being trafficked, you're being, targeted for that. Most people who are trafficked by somebody that they know. And it usually starts out as a romantic partner. And that is somebody who then emotionally abuses them and manipulates them and gaslights them into
Yes,
that they belong to that person, and if you really love me you will do this, and then they lose themselves in addiction. And more than anything, if you hear anything from this podcast, please stop judging people by what their labels are and try to understand something went into making that, and it's usually something so painful that it should evoke your compassion and your kindness and your caring. But the situation will only continue to get worse if we try and treat these societal ills with judgment, condemnation, and blame. The blame lies on a system that does not have a kind of a parachute in place for people who need extra help because they've been extra challenged. So I'm glad to hear that
absolutely.
you're passionate about that. And you are also trying to help people with recovery. What is it that you
Yeah.
do? I know you wrote two books, and it's about your story and your journey towards your own connection to self and self-worth. Because what people are frequently missing is that they were never given an idea of self-worth. When you talk about being beaten every single day of your life, there is a part of a child that will always believe that they are bringing this on themselves and that it must be their fault at some subconscious level, even if it's not a conscious level. And that damages their self-image and their self-worth. And again, they
Mhm.
perpetuate a cycle because they don't realize that they have essentially been programmed to approach themselves in a self-destructive manner. And what we really need
Yes,
to do is start looking at the reclamation of lives that have been lost to trauma as being worthwhile, because some of the most worthwhile people you have ever met have been through a lot, and they know how to extend that compassion to others because they're not busy judging them, they're busy empathizing with them. The cure for societal
absolutely.
ills lies in empathy.
My thing is I'm big on this. When I do my TikToks and stuff, I put up the hashtag in the stigma. You know that you don't have to be ashamed, and you're not a burden or an embarrassment. I'm a certified master life coach.
Mhm.
So I have certifications in happiness, goal, success, life purpose, especially, and I use those, and I use the same CBT methods. Now, I did go through a course in prison called they call it RSAT, which is advanced or ASAT. It's an advanced substance abuse treatment, but it's not really substance abuse treatment. It's a CBT course that teaches you how to change your perception on how you see the situations in order to empower yourself to make better decisions. And I use that completely when I'm coaching someone in order to help them. Okay.
What we need to define is CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yes.
It's the technique that essentially reprograms people's responses through repetition. If you're trying to reprogram the way somebody approaches themselves and those around them, it starts with engaging in behavioral patterns that will yield a positive result. And many people who have a traumatic back system or a backstory have something called OCD. It is obsessive compulsive disorder that is trauma related. And so they will compulsively engage in the same activities over and over again. And when they're trying to escape pain, it can be a very self-destructive pattern. What CBT helps teach people is a new pattern of doing things that is productive, that is healing, that is self-sustaining rather than self-destructive. Back to you, Mike. Sorry, I just wanted to break in there.
That's okay. And you also explained in there as well, NLP, neuro linguistic programming, as well as part of that. But what I do a little bit of NLP as well, but most of what I teach people is that thoughts create emotions, which create those behaviors. Okay. So the more you think about something in the past that's bad, the more it's going to create those emotions and you're going to create those behaviors. So if you can think of more empowering things, I know some of it comes from a lot of it comes from limiting beliefs from that trauma. And that's why I bring in the happiness program. I have a whole program on how to be happy within yourself, and not seek happiness from outside sources. And it tends to help people so much more because once they find that happiness with themselves and they start to not seek it, from the hedonistic happiness, they get away from that and they tend to start, seeing what I'm talking about, and it just empowers them a lot more. So I start there. If sometimes, I'm start working on a total transformation program as well, but that's, that involves life purpose and the goal success. But that's for somebody who's already gotten past this. They've learned how to be happy within and they want to know more, because it's taken me in the last, I'd say 2 or 3 years, how to finally get to where I am, and where I got the last piece of the puzzle was when my brother killed himself last September. I found the peace and the good in that situation, and I was like, "That's it. That's what I need to do to help other people. If I can find the peace in this and find happiness in it and make me feel better, I can show other people how to do this too, and they can get out of their traumas, as well." So
And
that's kind of what started me on this journey.
what we need to what will happen with people who are going through a great deal or have been through a great deal, when we say something like that, they can feel like, well, does that mean the divine is kicking the crap out of me so that I can help other people? No, that's not what that means. It means that
No.
life causes struggle and life can cause trauma, and a lot of what happens to us is circumstantial. It is socioeconomic. It is, what it does mean is that you look at the situations in your life, even if they have caused pain, saying, but I can still learn from this. I can do better
Yes.
and learn from what has gone wrong in the past so that I can do better in the future. And a lot of people
Yeah.
get caught in that pain-filled area where they're just dazed by the amount that has happened to them. And it's because they can't
Yeah.
understand what it did to them, they perpetually go forward doing the same things and being very self-destructive. If you stop and pause and accept, hey, listen, the past is gone, but it contains the lessons for who I am now. And look to your
You
past.
just said the key word there.
Look to your past for the things you can learn about what went wrong so that you can do better in the future. And that is the key to almost any form of recovery. Mike, who are you working with now and how do you work with people?
I've got a few people that are now starting to come in. I just started this business back in May. I've been working on starting it since January when I lost my. Had a $22 an hour job, but I wasn't happy there. Well, they ended up letting me go for some weird reasons that I'm working on. But I decided to do something with myself that makes me happy, and it's a field I've never been into before. But I feel it's necessary that to get the education out there. And you said the key thing right there is acceptance. It's the first step, is just accepting it. And once I accepted that, hey, you know what? I don't have to let my past define who I am. I can choose to be better and help other people because I've survived this. I mean, that's just a memory in my head, is all this past stuff. But if I'm not living right here in the present, I cannot help anybody because I'm not. I'm letting opportunity pass me by because I'm not living in the here and now, and that's where we have to live. But in accordance with that, I also had to learn how to forgive myself and forgive others.
Yes,
So
it's a key part to releasing that trauma. And Jacob's the guy that I do a lot of podcasts with. He's basically my co-host on a lot of these very serious subjects. We just had an episode on forgiveness, what it is and how to forgive. So check that out if you're interested. One of
I
the
will.
I wanted to have Mike, and I was talking to the audience, but if you want to check it out, you do that too, Mike. That's awesome.
Oh, I've already subscribed to your podcast, so
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on is that it is very easy for women, I'm not trying to be gendered, but we do live in a patriarchal society, to talk about their feelings. It is something that our society embraces. But I wanted to have you on because men do not have a good method for approaching their emotional world. Quite frequently, men almost literally have the feelings beaten out of them, and they're told if they're showing their feelings, it's a form of weakness rather than a tool for self-understanding. But it is a tool for self-understanding. And just like in fiction, how we do better when we have character recognition, if you know anybody who is struggling with the same issues like anger management, a tendency towards self-destruction, it often does help for someone who identifies as male to have somebody from the same type of experience. So I attract a lot of people who are like, I totally get you. This is the divine feminine. We have Mike on here to help people find their divine masculine, and that is the highest that they can achieve. And there's masculinity and femininity. Listen, we get very wrapped up in gender and biological functions, but what it really is are ruling energies within. And if you
yeah,
are really in the self-destructive criminality, drug abuse energy, your divine masculine is out of balance, and you need to learn how to understand your impulses and your anger. Frequently, you'll have to heal your chakras, and particularly your sacral chakra, when you're dealing with anger and self-destructive impulses. What do you do?
amen to that.
What do you do when you start working with somebody, Mike? Do you get their life story? What do you do? Do you assign them tasks? Are there reading materials?
Um,
Tell me a little bit about your healing process for people.
First, I have a free consultation and road mapping with them to see if I can even help them, because some people have not, dealt, because you still have to deal with the past a little bit. You have to face those demons. So if they haven't at least faced them and been, acceptance of them, I try to, steer them towards more of a counseling thing, because I'm not a counselor. I do have a psychology background, but and then I see if I can help them. And if I can help them from the here and now and the present, try to help them be, reach their highest potential, then what I do is, I just have a session where they talk and give me their story and let them go through things. I do assign every session that has activities that they have that they got to bring back next week. So it is hands-on, because ultimately I'm teaching them how to train their own selves. I'm not doing it for them. I'm teaching them how to do it themselves. So it
And
empowers them to know that they have something that they did themselves. It's an investment in themselves.
and one of the things we also need to understand is there's a really old saying called an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Get to anger,
Yes,
impulse control, and self-destructive patterns in a person's life before it goes off the rails, and you can turn their entire journey in a better direction. And one of the things
absolutely.
you're talking about is understanding self, but letting the outer world also reflect the inner world through healthy habits, and learning how to healthfully express what you're feeling rather than to act on your feelings in a self-destructive fashion, if I'm understanding what you're saying.
Yeah. One of the activities we do is called anchoring. And what anchoring is it you put yourself in those trigger moments up to the point where it almost triggers you, and then you let off. Okay. And that tells you where that trigger point is. Okay. So that way, when you're getting close to that trigger point, how to deal with it. Okay. And it tells you when to back off. It could be something that's just, moving your fingers, touching your nose or something, but you have to put yourself in those positions. Also, not just to learn where the trigger point is, but to identify what the trigger is itself, because being self-aware of what this is very, very important.
And
Because if you don't know what
understanding
it
what it
is,
might be reminding you of. When we talk about triggers, what happens is people have a disproportionate response in the present due to past trauma that has not been properly processed nor understood. And that's basically what a trigger is. And when you're talking
and it
about
happens unconsciously.
what we talk about in the spiritual community is grounding, and anchoring and grounding are very,
Yep.
very similar philosophies, where you're dropping into your physical body rather than heading into your mental space to escape and sometimes have a disproportionate response designed to protect your vulnerabilities. And that's what really happens when people are triggered, is that they have been triggered into a mode of operation or survival mode that has them
Yep.
defend that trauma quite frequently very violently or with a lot of anger or with more emotion than the situation would warrant because you're dealing with that backlog of unprocessed trauma. So when you talk
Yes.
about a method to help you recognize your own red flags around your triggers, that is one of the most valuable things a person can have is even before
Yes.
you fully understand or have healed your trauma, you can understand your triggers and you can actually bring on enough stress that you are like on the cusp of it. And then it's called responding and not reacting. What you're teaching
Yes.
how people can respond rather than react, because when we're in a reactive space, we're frequently in a very destructive space. Is that correct?
Yes, and the fact is that you have the choice of how to react in a situation because you can't change everything that goes on around you. You can't change what people say, what people do, but if it doesn't, if you can't change it, you can't control it. You have the choice how to react to it. But some people unconsciously react because of there might be a trigger that they don't even know, and then so they'll unconsciously react, and then they'll wonder, what? Okay, now why am I in this bad position? I don't even know what happened here. This is what that does. It helps them identify those. Now to me, I've gotten to a place of peace, and I'm a very spiritual person myself. I'm a firm believer in God, but not into traditional religion. Since I meditate when I'm praying, and I deal with those spirits, and I avoided this since I was a kid because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't want no part of it. But now I've kind of embraced it. So, now I see that stuff coming a mile away. And if I see somebody coming that's going to mess with my peace, I say, get on down the road, buddy. You got to go. I'll love you from a distance.
And knowing
But it's identifying.
that is a key point in keeping yourself well, is understanding that sometimes there's literally no point in engaging with somebody who isn't doing their work. So choosing the path of least resistance is choosing your peace. And whenever you choose your
Yes.
peace, you give yourself another day to heal, you give yourself more opportunities to grow and to continue on and to continue to expand. And the other thing that you said that really jives with something that I'm always teaching my clients and anybody who listens is that when you think of God or the divine or spirit or source or however you wish to term it, please stop thinking of it through the lens of religion, because religion,
Yes.
look to the central figures of a religion for their teachings, because that is the core truth of that religion. And that's what you need to emulate. But the religion itself is a power structure that has a lot of things put into place in it to try and control you, to make sure that you're under their control and under their influence. Your relationship to
Yes.
the divine goes directly to the divine. Make your relationship to
And
God, source, spirit, however you wish to term it, directly to the divine. And the religious leaders are not the people who can tell you what to do when you have that. When you have a true connection to source, you are guided from within, and your highest self will guide you. The whole go
let
between
me tell you this.
is a power
Oh,
structure.
I'm sorry. When I, decided to embrace it, I decided to look because I read the Bible and stuff, and it's missing a lot of things that people don't understand. And when I found the Apocrypha and read that, it made the Bible make sense, and it made also the Quran make sense. It made all these religions are teaching very similar teachings, just in a different philosophy.
They all are, which does not suggest that it's all BS. What it suggests is that there is a core, universal, elemental truth within those belief systems.
Yes.
But because we as human beings crave power, religions themselves try to utilize that and start to amass power and wealth, and it corrupts the message and it corrupts the people who are involved in it.
Yes,
But
it does.
the first central truth has validity to saving you from your lesser nature so that you can get the best outcomes, the best love, the best friendships, and the best spiritual experience that you can have here. But there will always be challenges, because we need those challenges to learn and to grow. And it is simply part of this living experience. Hey,
Yes.
Mike, one of the things I want to ask you about, because it'll happen with clients sometimes, I'm not going to be sharing anybody's personal details, but they in particular will be dealing with their teenagers of any gender, and they're starting to show warning signs around drug abuse, around abuse of others. Sometimes it's in the home, sometimes it's not. It's usually something that they've witnessed. It's usually a byproduct of trauma. What are people supposed to do when they see concerning behaviors in their developing people, and they want to make sure that at that crossroads moment, they help get them on the healing path and the path towards better understanding of self and others?
First of all, educating yourself on what and why those behaviors happen is the hugest thing. The second thing is once you educate yourself, you have to love that person so tightly that you have to tell them, I'm not going to be your friend. I'm going to be your parent. You don't get a choice of when to recover from this. We're going to do this now. You'll thank me as later when, you might not like me now, but you'll thank me later and the biggest thing is keep them close and get rid of the people that are serving them this crap. And, instead of, because like with me, I was put out to the streets, at some point, because of my behaviors and it pushed me right back to when I was crying out for help. Hey, I need help. Somebody please help me. I don't want to be like this, and when I got, sometimes family will turn their back on you. When that happens, you're pushing them right back to it. No, I don't know one heroin addict out there that wants to be a heroin addict. It is
Yeah,
not fun. There's nothing pleasant about it. You know, it's just a horrible life way to live.
Now, I don't personally have personal experience with it, but I have known people who have suffered from incredible levels of addiction to incredibly destructive substances. And it was almost always, it started out as an escape from pain that got out of control and almost
Right.
took them out with it. What organizations do you suggest people reach out to when they're in trouble?
Um, it's really hard to say because I have a very bad relationship with law enforcement because of the way I've been treated. So I don't, for me, it's not running to law enforcement, but seek your local. If you have to go to a counselor, a psychiatrist, ask them because those professionals are there to help. I mean, they do help. Sometimes people need medication, sometimes they don't. They had me on at one point 30 different psych meds, and I don't take any now because I like to be in control of my body, not all whacked out and zombified. But if you can't find something, usually your local community resources, there's a community center, the health department, they can guide you to those resources. They can get you that education because if you don't get the education, you're going to end up having to bail somebody out, or worse, putting them, planning a funeral.
What
So
we need people to understand as well is, and I wouldn't tell people to go towards law enforcement either, quite simply because that is about controlling and containing a criminal element
it
and
is.
shutting them out, not about healing. And what you want to do is, like, organizations like the United Way will have resources to give you referrals towards programs that may help. Contact your local hospitals. They all have social workers to find out about things like anger
211.
management courses. I beg your pardon, 211? Is that
211 is in every state, every city. You can call 211 and you can get some of that help there too.
yeah, that is an excellent, I thank you for making that suggestion. When
Yep.
you are stymied, please reach out to as many resources as you can. Don't be afraid to run Google sources. What do I do to help? And if, by the way, if we're talking about like reunification camps and give those a pass, guys. Go towards something that has group activities that will help re-socialize people who are experiencing antisocial behaviors, like anger management classes. Scare tactics rarely work, but helping people to find a way to understand themselves can
Right.
genuinely help as well.
And even people like me, life coaches, you can reach out to us, and if we can help, we will, or we can refer you to other people. If we can't help somebody, we can refer them usually to a counselor that can. But that's our job. Literally, a life coach's job is to help people transform, motivate, and improve.
I'm always sending people free resources for healing, and it's not because I have anything against energy healers. The real people who do that professionally, they're so worth the money, but a lot of people don't have the resources. So I'm always trying to connect people to free resources because healing is something that benefits the entire society. We should make it as free as humanly
And
possible.
that's part of my mission statement is I'll help somebody even if money's not an option. I would rather help before I need the money first. Yes, I do need to get paid, but to me it's more important to help before uh, money becomes an issue because there are people out there that do need the help and can't pay for it. I would be more than willing to coach somebody that can't pay for it and just get a testimonial from them if it helps. You know what I'm saying? Because they're still giving something back, but they're not giving anything that they can't afford to do.
It's called an energy exchange, and if you cannot afford to pay somebody, there are other ways to give back. There's
Absolutely.
bartering. There's also things like leaving reviews or interacting or helping people out with the
Absolutely.
algorithm to promote them more. It really genuinely, everybody does deserve to eat who does this. Everybody deserves to get
Yes.
paid. But the other part, the flip side of that coin, is that people in trouble deserve access to healing, and reach out to
Yep.
the people you know. If they don't have an answer for you, they'll have suggestions to go towards the other answers that are available. And
Right.
one of the things to keep in mind is that there is never a point in life at which it is too late to change. At any
Absolutely.
particular moment, you can turn your entire life around if you decide to, and then you act on it. So whatever it
Absolutely.
is that you're trying to overcome in your life, whether it is toxic behaviors, a tendency towards toxic relationships, if it is emotional dysfunction that has a tendency to derail your life, there, honest to goodness, there is something that you can begin today. It will not change everything, but it'll start changing something. And when something starts changing, the momentum builds, and you can recommit to yourself as a person of worth the effort, worth the energy, and worth the healing, because that's where it starts, is understanding that no matter what you've been through, no matter how much you suffer, no matter how much pain you are in, I know this to be true. You deserve to feel better. You have a divine soul within you, and you too have a purpose, but only you can go towards it. If you are the person, instead of somebody seeking help for somebody that you love, if you are the person in trouble, reach out, commit to yourself in order to
And
be able
yeah,
to change the narrative story of your life and have a better outcome. I'm sorry about that. I had a breakthrough call. I forgot to put it on flight mode, guys. So you're going to have a ring a ding, but we'll
that's
see
okay.
it's just divine emphasis around you can change your life. You can change
Yes,
your
and you know, I will stay right here now to even your guest that I do offer that same thing. Even if you can't pay, still reach out. I will do whatever I can to help, and and if I can't help, I will help find you someone that can. You know, so
And you're dealing with people at a level of dysfunction that, really, I am a spiritual teacher, and most of the people coming towards me are about tarot reading. But whenever it comes to like energy healings and things, they're all over YouTube. Please remember, there are also certified therapists and psychologists who do TED Talks and healing talks, and the information is available to you if you are willing to do the research to go towards those resources. The internet,
absolutely.
the internet is a perilous place, because my God, you're only ever one click away from something that'll practically make your hair fall all the way out. It's so horrifying. But it's also,
Yes,
you're also always one click away from a better answer for a better life, for a better tomorrow. It's just you have to be the one choosing which direction you're going to go in. When you come to your fork in the road, choose you and having a better and healthier experience. Mike, was
it's
there
okay to be selfish for yourself.
exactly. Mike, was there a particular moment at which you leave prison after 2 years and you go forward? Was there a moment in which you're like, this is it? I feel like I have achieved a foundation from which I can build, or are you still building your foundation?
Yes. Once I got off parole, 2 days later, I was in Florida. I got out of Michigan. I left that state. I haven't been back. I lived in Florida for a while, and then lived about 7, 8 months in Georgia. I was in a relationship that ended up being toxic, and I said, I can't do this no more. I've already started learning. I got to go, and I left, and I moved here to Kentucky, and that's where I've been. And that's since I had that job right away. I worked there 10 months, and then things happened, and I decided, you know what? I've worked for myself before, but it's always been something that I've, already known how to do and how to network. This is something completely new. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to not stop until I just lost a buddy due to heroin addiction a couple months ago. He ended up died. The people that gave it to him all were worried about their jail time, and they left him to die. Except for one friend, she stayed there while he died, and held him while he died. And that's just unfortunate. But that just gives me more of a passion and a drive to help people with any kind of trauma recovery, substance use. That's my reason why. That's my big enough reason why. That's my passion. That's why I wake up. It's what drives me every day. And I work a 50-hour week job as well. I do this both just to keep going, just because I know there's people that still need this help and this world needs this change.
What we need to also understand is that addiction is a disease of despair. People fall further
Yes.
and further into addiction because they cannot find hope. So what would really help with our crisis, our opioid addiction problems, our heroin crisis, the tent cities that have sprung up in so many cities, is not condemning nor punishing people who are suffering from despair, but trying to find a way to give them a more hopeful future. And if they have a more hopeful future, guess what? Society has a more hopeful future. So if you think, why would I ever care about people that have fallen that low? It is because it is part of your society. Everybody benefits when society is healthier. Everybody benefits when we have more safety nets to help keep people from falling through the cracks. And if the government isn't going to do it because they genuinely aren't very good at getting things done, we're going to have to start joining together on a local level to try and figure out what are the solutions. If the government is going to contain nothing but roadblocks and bureaucracy, we need to start working on a level with one another where if they won't solve the problems, then let's do it. Let's all try and approach each other as citizens and
I can give you
members
some
of the same.
statistics. Let's put it this way. There is enough money in this world for every one of us in this country to be rich, first of all. Second of all, the numbers are like this. In 1992, there was less than 6,000. There actually was only 5,012 opioid-related deaths. Now, 30 years later, in 2022, there was 107,900. That is astronomical, and it's not talked about enough. It is not talked about enough. It is not worked on enough. It is not even regarded enough.
It's not
Nowhere near it.
at the level of what is causing it, which it is not that people are weaker. It's, first of all, the drugs are actually stronger, but secondly, there are fewer and fewer compelling reasons for people to heal, because if you're facing a hopeless future, it's much easier to turn towards self-destruction. And the other thing genuinely is that if we do not help make mental health care appropriately available to those who are struggling, they are going to go towards illicit drugs simply to alleviate their pain. So also, whenever things are up on a ballot, please vote for more outreach, more accessibility for mental health care, because if we head this off at the past, if we treat people when they're still reeling from trauma rather than deep in the pit of despair where they're treating their pain with anything they can get their hands on, once again, literally everybody benefits. If you want to live in a safer world, heal the people who are suffering. If you want a world,
and it starts in your city council. Your city council meetings are there for a reason. People need to join them more and express, hey, why do we have all these people living on the streets? Why are all these drugs around here? More police, more prison guards, and more bars are not the answer. They're absolutely not the answer.
And please quit electing the same people over and over again and expecting them to do any different. Make change. Get comfortable with change. Things need to change so that people quit dying. We don't want this world to keep getting worse. And the only way for it to get better is for us to be comfortable with changing the way things are so that we can have a better result. Do not blame those who are suffering. Simply ask, what can I do to help alleviate that suffering? Because we all have a role to play in it. All right, Mike. Very good to have spoken to you. Please reiterate the titles of your book and your socials, where people can find you and how to contact you.
Okay. The first book is From the Streets to Redemption, choosing to live when the world wants you to die. And also in my emails I sent you, I did send you the links for those. And the second one is How to Find Happiness in the Worst Possible Times. They're both available on Amazon. You can look them up by the names. You can find me on Facebook. It's at Deacon's Legacy for their TikTok. And then my personal one is mjarrell237 at Facebook. So those are my three main platforms. I'm starting a YouTube, but it's I cross post a lot. So but TikTok and Facebook are my two biggest ones. So and Deacon's Legacy is the biggest one you can find me at. So
And again, please understand, one of the reasons I wanted Mike to come on is we need voices from the divine masculine side. We need
Yeah,
voices that other men can hear. Listen, I could talk like it's called character identification in fiction, but it
yeah,
works in the healing industry as well. You need to have a point of commonality with somebody to be able to reach them. And although we have that commonality in our humanity, it is best discovered in we hear people who are like us more easily. And please understand,
yes. And I can leave a positive note. When I was a kid, showing emotion would have gotten me abused or beaten. So don't feel bad. It's okay to let loose and get that out of you and cry and get it over with. But you can change too. You don't have to feel that load of that macho stigma, ideology, whatever you want to call it. You can still change.
what we
So
have decided is masculine in this world is literally destroying the men of our world.
it
Please
is. It really is.
please start expanding your idea of what a man is. A man is somebody who has control over his own power, but that is not about repression. That is about understanding of the power he possesses. And I'm not a gendered person at all, but I do see this in men more frequently than I do in people who identify as female. I see people who can't, they've repressed their emotions for so long that they can't even find them, that they can't call
Yep.
them forward. And so they act in these self-destructive manners. If you understand your impulses and you understand your emotions and how to take care of them, you will be happier, you will be more successful. Please understand, our idea of success in this world is a very corrupt influence. We've been taught it's about money.
Yep.
It's not. It's about happiness. It's about joy. It's about purpose. It's about connection. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, Mike. I'm
You're
Alane.
welcome.
Find me at therisingmoon.com to book me for a tarot reading or a life coaching session. You can find me on YouTube at Cronecast at the Rising Moon. And you can also always find me here at Logical Magic Examining Esoterica. No matter what you are facing, no matter how daunting, no matter how frightening, you can heal and you can have a better future. And that starts by taking the steps today. Take care. Be well. Live magically.